Are you looking to overcome debt, take control of spending, and grow savings so you can retire at some point? I know that I am looking forward to learning how to do so, and some of you have told me that you are too. Make sure you stay to the end. Welcome, everybody. And today, my guest is all about helping you get ready, be able to retire. But before I bring my guest on, my name is Shri, and I'm the host and of Journey of an Entrepreneur. And it's real crazy that 4 years ago I started this show, and that anniversary show is coming up. And so I want you guys to be there to celebrate with me. So just to let you guys know, if you're listening for the first time, I am a video marketing producer who helps medical, dental, and law practices use social media, video, live streaming shows, and podcasts to gain raving leads that want to work for their practice. And in return, this will be able to help them scale, be able to get them exposure to be speaking on stages, or just even be able to start a new business. My guest, a financial coach for Gen Xers, and host of the Wealthy After 40 podcast. Being brave in her career and personal budgeting, she was able to retire at the age of 50. Now she's on a mission to help Gen Xers ditch debt, save for retirement, and makes a dream a reality. Her name is Dalene Higgins, and I'm excited to have her on. And guys, if you have questions, drop them in the comments because I want to make sure that I ask those questions. Also, let us know where you're tuning in from. So, Dalene, let me ask you this. When you are not helping your clients with, getting ready to be able to be debt free, retirement, what do you like to do for fun?
I'm a reader. Everything fiction. Everything fiction. Right now I'm on romance. Just got done with romantasy. Love a good thriller, a legal thriller. I read it all.
So I'm a big drama, legal. So I'm that person who will watch NCIS and Law and Order like 50 times because once I watch the whole season, I will watch it again because that's who I am. If you are watching, I would love to know what are you watching? Whether you're listening on the podcast or you're watching the live or replay, share in the comments what are you watching or reading for fun. So let me ask you this, because I know that a lot of people are like, how did she, was able to retire at the age of 50? But, before we get into it, how did you choose the age of 50 to retire?
Well, dumb luck, really, if I go back to when I started. So 18, living at home, found myself unemployed. I eventually found a job with a local police department. So that's where I started. So government, which government even still has pensions. So it didn't mean a thing to me at that age, right? I'm 18. I'm like every other 18-year-old out there. But I put myself through college, worked, did all of the things. And so I changed from city police to county sheriff. And I was like, okay, I did 17 years at that other. I can do another 17. And then I'm like, wait, I only need 13 more years to qualify for that pension. So it was at that point, I was mid 30s, that I was like, you know what? I got to get my crap together so that if I want to, I can, because it was an option. And I say it was an option because that was an immediate 40% cut in pay. So I just got focused, and my daughter was 8. We only had the one, me and my husband. He also worked to government as well. I just got really super focused on what we were doing immediately, which we were recreating. We were riding motorcycles, four-wheelers, camping, doing all of the things. She did sports, so we supported her through that. And while we did that, while I supported all of that, I also started stocking away for retirement, putting into all of the different accounts that were available to me and being prepared and really getting focused on my spending, right? Because being prepared for that 40% cut and pay kind of takes a little bit of planning. So it was a 15-year, really super focused journey. And I told my husband I won't do any more than 35 years. There was just no benefit after that. So at the age of 48 was technically my 30 year. That was my very first year I could opt out. At that time, my family and I, my siblings and I, we were still caring for my mother. And it worked out with work. So I was still working and caring for her. And she passed. I got through all of this stuff because I was the executor handling all of that. And I finally looked at my husband and I said, it's time. I'm ready to be done. And so I didn't really set out at 50, but I was 50 and I retired with, 32 years in the government sector.
Okay, so I want to say hello to John, Olga, and Ann. Thanks for joining in. And what we're going to be learning is how to get prepared to be able to retire. We're hearing the journey of Dalene. She's just expressing how she kind of figured it out early on. And some of us may be still trying to figure out tomorrow or how are we going to buy groceries, but there is a way. And I'm going to get to them. And if you have questions, please ask them. Whether you're watching the replay or the live or listening to the podcast, your question is important because this is scary for some of us. Like, for example, I'm just going to talk about me. I actually took my savings, and when I got laid off, I used it to pay off everything. So I was very blessed to pay off my parents' home so I could be a full-time moocher. And then I was able to, when I got laid off, I paid off my car, my debt, my credit card. So everything that I've done thus far is all for the business. So if something were to happen, I've always, said I could sleep in my car. I can rent out my house. Like there's so many options. So definitely we want to make sure we get your questions. So Dalene, what made you want to take your experience and be able to help others to do the same?
It really just boiled down to that feeling of accomplishment when I retired, realizing that I had out on that long journey. And my husband and I, we kid around. All we have to do to collect our quote paycheck now is wake up every day. That's the only thing. And just realizing after, punching a time clock, showing up 40 hours a week for 32 years that I didn't have to do it anymore. I had actually achieved my financial goal, and that excitement and that feeling like that shift into that new phase of life was just, so good. And so as I was deciding what I wanted to do, instead of sitting in the recliner all day, I was, just looking into all of the several possibilities. And I thought, I want other people to have this same feeling, not necessarily about retirement, whatever their goal is, if that is to even buy their first home or pay off their home or get out of debt. I want them to feel this feeling of satisfaction, excitement, like, you did a hard thing. And I think we've all had something similar, but it was just such a great feeling that I want others to experience it as well.
Quentin, I'm glad that you can catch this live. We're always happy to have you here. So that makes sense. You've already done the hard work, and the hardest sometimes is just getting up. But now it's like anything that you do thus going forward is just extra. So, when you think about retiring, what do you find is the number one limiting factor that stops people from retiring early?
Well, I especially believe, like Gen Xers, we've worked for so long. We've done just the work. I think they really truly believe that's the only way to get a paycheck. So they won't even explore outside of that box of what is the possibility and what can it look like. And so I think the other thing is that false idea of retirement is, you have to actually leave your job and not ever work again, or you have to travel, and honestly believing that retirement is whatever you make it, is what I think will help people start exploring those options. And as you start looking at your savings, what you've accumulated, maybe if you're not quite there yet to fully walk away, you can at least partially walk away, or walk away to a job that you feel more comfortable in, or spend less time at. There's all sorts of options. And I think exploring those can help those individuals who are like, it just will never happen, or I can't afford it, or I'm just used to this paycheck, that stability. And I get that it's a little different, a little scary, but to start exploring that and find out what your options are, I think is such a good way to start getting out of that box there.
And I want to bring up this comment, which is from Quentin, who's saying, facts, I'm not even looking at retirement because it's a myth to me as a Gen X. I mean, it feels like it's so far away, but yet it's not, because there are some who are actually like, hey, I'm ready. So for those who are like, I'm ready, what is the number one thing you need to have to be able to retire early?
Start saving. Make sure you're saving in all of the different retirement accounts, and spread it. I say spread it far and wide, because you need not only those that are limited on age, but more immediate that you can tap into. So really just true investment. Keep your liquidity, so in case there is an emergency or a problem, that you can get to it. So, really just spread it far and wide. Save as much as you can. Shoot for that 20%, but if you can get it higher than that, go for it. And then understand that money doubles every 7 years. And so if you're like, okay, Quentin, he's not even think about it. He thinks it's a myth. Like, how many years do you have left? And then divide that by, 7. Does it give you 2 cycles or 3 cycles? And how much do you have in there? And then just quickly double that. What does that look like? And the next thing I like to say, because you'll get a financial advisor, financial planner, and they'll say, you need 25 times this, or you need this much, or 80% of it, or I've heard all of the things. Honestly, I love to get to the nitty gritty of the numbers. What does living life like look for you and cost for you in retirement? Get your annual expense and then times that by 25. And that's more closely your number. But there's all sorts of ways to adjust that. Like I said, you can work part-time. My husband, he goes out and he works 3 days a week. He chooses a job that he wants, and he tells him he's not going to work for the lowest wage. They got to pay him higher. You're really in such a different position of kind of demanding what you want and creating what you want. And he just, works 3 days, and he enjoys the rest of his days to just be retired and tinker and do, but not get so bored. So, create whatever it is you want, but start saving now, start spreading the wealth. And yeah, just do what you really want to. Believe you can.
So we've got a lot going on in the comments. And so Anne is sharing, I hear that, Quentin, I feel like I'll never actually retire. And then we have John who's sharing, I'm a Gen X, but often fear for what Gen Z faces, looking at the state of the global economy and the income medium versus the housing prices. What would be your advice to them?
Yeah, I have a Gen Z daughter. She is experiencing all of the things. She's just set her sights on starting to save for a down payment. That's all you can do. It's pretty much the same steps. I agree, though, housing prices are crazy. My husband and I are trying to relocate closer to her. And, that realization of how far the dollar can go in the certain states. Not every state is the same. And realizing that we almost have to step down in what we're selling our home for. But Gen Zers, if they start today, this is my advice I give my daughter. She just turned 26, and I'm like, just start saving $25, $50 a paycheck, and do not touch it and do not look at it ever again. And it will grow. The stock market went. So the month I retired and I rolled my money from one 401 to my IRA, holy cow, I lost like $200,000. And it took a whole year to come back up, but now it's back up, rising. And so I know people fret that, and they're like, oh my gosh, but today it's down. How can I trust it? go look at a 20-year history of it. And then trust in the fact that in 20 years, you'll be at that percentage higher, which depending on where you put it at, S&P is one that it'll gain 20% or more. Yes, there's going to be some changes and stuff, but that's the average. That is the average. So Gen Zers start just like we all did, saving for your down payment, trying to get your foot in anywhere you can, work hard. I know I talked with a podcast host, and she was working 3 jobs, and she's like, I barely can make rent and I can barely do this, but living in the city to take opportunities of work and those options. And that is a balance. So they are balancing more of the now than the future. But if they can slide 25, $50 a paycheck into a retirement account, I think that will sustain them. But I think they'll still be okay for the current.
And that's really solid tips, because, we have now to start to make that. And we have Quentin who's saying, and as soon as I thought of retirement, grandkids came, and it's like, I want to spoil it and travel to see them. So I need to work a little longer. And then Quentin is saying, I wish I would have done life insurance, because that helps a lot with going towards retirement. So I actually really want to ask that question. So when you do life insurance, how does that help a little bit with retirement? Is that something you know? Okay.
No, I don't sell insurance or promote insurance, but I know he's probably talking more about the term and switching that over into the actual cash value. So looking at your options, but again, that would be just one option as you're going to spread yourself far and wide. So when I was saying that, looking at your 401s, the IRAs, your Roths, I would also look at life insurance if that feels right to you. That's honestly what I tell my clients. Go with your gut, what feels right for you. And I share that because I purchased, it's been almost 3 years ago now, I purchased long-term care insurance for myself. Would I advise everybody to do that? No. But for my situation and coming out of, there's 7 of us siblings, caring for my mom, that I knew my only child could not do the same care. So I needed to, financially prep for that. And that was an easy piece of the puzzle to start building at that point. So really think about all of the pieces and supporting you. So life insurance, if it's set up right, it can support you, but it can also limit you. So make sure you really understand that before you opt into that.
And that's a good tip. Like, what I'm really hearing is, like, you're thinking 10 steps ahead, and you're saying, you know what? I know that I'm going to need extra support later in life, because it is true. We don't know what's to come. Yeah. And having to make the choice to put somebody in a nursing home is not always easy, but it is something that you have to think about if it's necessary. And Quentin's saying, great response. So I love that you're saying to take those necessary thinking process steps. But let me ask you, what happens if, let's say, you have been doing all of this, and unfortunately, and you get into a situation, you get into a divorce? And I'm seeing this happen to a lot of men, but I'm saying it can happen to a woman, and then you lose everything. So how do you get back up? Or let's say you lost your job, and so you're trying to make ends meet, and you kind of had to deplete some of your savings. Where do you start from?
Every one of those situations, the very first step is gaining clarity. So I've worked with several clients who have been post-divorce anywhere from 6 months to 2 years or even 5 years. And they're really stuck in that thinking of when they were married and the way it was when they were married, and supporting and, spending money that way. And so really reversing and getting in that clarity of what it is that you have, what you're supporting, what it looks like, maybe a little bit of the why. But mostly those types of individuals get really hung up or hang up their worth on their self-worth with that. And so they're not vying for a better position in employment. They're not trying to ask for the raise. And so recognizing that divorce can kind of squash your value, and then you're tying your value to money, and now you don't have enough, and then you kind of are in this cycle of, not making ends meet. So kind of stepping back, taking that step back and getting clarity and understand, where am I? What does it look like? And how can I start moving forward? And I think, yes, it's a starting over, kind of like when you were in your 20s and 30s, which is very, very hard, because yes, I've seen that with a lot of men, and it was a few women as well. And it's so detrimental, but just taking those initial steps to, kind of take a breath, and then start moving forward again. And you can rebuild, and you can make it what you want.
So for someone who's like having to rebuild, and from your experience of working with others, what have you seen as like the time frame that they kind of like get back? Not even, they may not get back to where they were, but maybe they're just in a better financial situation, even if it's with less.
Yeah. So, I worked my very first client, and experiencing that was, and he needed to actually go out and, apply for jobs. So he was looking at, because he was quite in debt again. So recognizing his true situation, what he could afford, it was his lease payment that was creating the debt. So scaling back and realizing where he could actually rent, or how he could convert that to a purchase. And then, start paying off that debt. And in a year, he's actually starting to make progress moving forward. Number one, because he now understands what is driving his expenses and his debt. And number two, that he is worth going out and applying for a better job. And he can do that. I think they're just kind of like, I'm not worth anything anymore. And so, a year to at least get to their feet underneath them and start seeing that momentum growing and pushing.
And that's something, for some of us, we're like, we want it overnight, but sometimes it just takes a little bit, but it will happen. And Quentin is sharing, I wish I had this advice back in 2015 when I had my divorce and starting over. What a wealth of advice. Yes, I do agree. And if you have any questions, definitely drop them. And so if you think about, we find that we carry something that we do consistently in our lives. This one thing is what we carry in everything we do. So what's that one thing that you have done consistently well in your life? And this can be professionally or personal.
I am a planner. In fact, that's also the bad, right? Because I plan. Sometimes I don't take action quick enough, but I love creating a plan, making a plan. Back when I was getting everything in order, like meal planning was just so very easy for me. It still kind of boggles my mind that people struggle with that, but that's something that I'm really good with. And so throwing together, I used to do like 6 weeks at a time back when I was working and my daughter was doing sports and all of those. I'd hurry and create a meal plan. It was 6 weeks and I wouldn't have to touch it again. So really just planning and preparing and creating those lists and then executing. But as a entrepreneur, I am so great at planning that sometimes I fail to execute, but it's that's the learning part for me. But yeah, creating a plan, having it set out, and then actually following through with those action steps is where I need to be better at.
Well, definitely I can see the planning being that your strength, because as we've been talking, I can tell that even all of us listening, watching, we can tell like the whole, hey, I need to think about XYZ, this could happen. And that plays a really big strength, especially in helping others with getting comfortable with their finances. And John is sharing the biggest lesson I learned the hard way in my life is that making money and creating wealth are two different things. I wish someone would have told me when I was younger. And so if you could share, like, to you, what's the difference between wealth and making money?
Yeah. So, I just jumped on my IG stories earlier today because I was on my recent podcast episode. I shared how about having conversations. And so one of the conversations was to teach your kids how to work and where money comes from, and that those two to go together. But then that second step to kind of add to that would be, because I did this with my daughter. She's trying to decide what she wanted to do career wise and work wise. She goes, it doesn't make a lot of money. And I said, it doesn't matter. you will create your life from whatever money you have. As I was on my journey, my biggest role models, my inspiration was not the people who had retired early. It was none of those, investors. I love Warren Buffett, but not even him. It was all of those single moms, those single parents who may or may not be getting child support, and most of them did not. They were able to make mountains out of molehills. And watching them, my sister-in-law was one of them. She would literally save her money all year so that the 2 months for the holidays, she could have cable. So she was creating the wealth in the months that it meant the most to her. And just recognizing that was where I realized, it really comes down to what you truly want and what that will create for you. So that is what wealth is. And so getting real with yourself, getting and creating your dream that you desire, start there. Because if it's not in your heart, you're not going to be able to do it. Paying off debt is a goal, but it's not a dream or a desire of what you want from your money.
So I will say that's a mic drop, because that's really true. Like we can build and save and work, and maybe it's this 1 month we want to be able to just enjoy, be off, and not have to work so hard, but we have to put in the work beforehand, and it makes a lot of sense. So what I've just done is I've dropped to how to connect with you, listen to your podcast. I was actually listening to our podcast because, of course, when you're researching your guests, you want to know who are they, what are they about, what questions to ask. And for me, if you have a podcast, that's like the fastest way to learn about you really, really quick. But I definitely would say check out her podcast, connect with her. If you're watching this live, listening to the podcast, or you are watching the replay, just let Dalene know that you watched her, listened from this show, so she knows and you're not blocked or something. But what we're going to do now is we're going to continue this conversation onto Instagram. So I'm inviting you to come and join us. And we have one more comment from John. This is the moment I stopped buying dumb stuff to fill the hole in my confidence to impress people I didn't even know was a life changer for me. And it's true, as an entrepreneur, I've learned, even though I don't make a lot as much as I used to, I'm still living more of a life. Like I'm able to pay for more than I ever thought was possible. So it's all a life, mindset, lifestyle change. But we're not going to have that conversation here. I'm going to tell you guys to come and join us. And until my next live, which is going to be on Saturday with Dr. Jacinta, I am inviting you guys to come and join. Thank you, Dalene, for sharing all that you did. Thank you, everybody who joined in the live, the replay, or listening to the podcast. So until my next live and episode, have a wonderful evening or morning, everybody. Bye.
Goodbye.